It's Open Line Friday. Rush Limbaugh, half my brain tied behind my back just to make it fair. F. Chuck Todd here on the Today Show today. Savannah Guthrie talking to him, and she said, "So Chuck, what happens next? You have a vacant job over there in the House of Representatives speakership. It's a powerful job, and yet you don't have people falling all over themselves to fill it. Why is that?"
Nobody wants it for the very reasons why John Boehner's leaving the job. The place is impossible to run right now. It's going to be impossible to run during a presidential election year. The same forces that are dividing the Republican Party, Trump, Carson, Fiorina, from Bush and Rubio and all that stuff, these are the forces in the House that are basically saying, we don't want the same people running the House. So I think McCarthy was going to be Boehner 2.0. I think a lot of conservatives saw that, and I think that's why they were trying to torpedo this thing.
What it boils down to, it's these forces versus the voters. When was the last time, and I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but what F. Chuck Todd's saying here basically is all of these establishment types are afraid of the voters. They're afraid of us. When he said nobody wants it for the very reason Boehner's leaving the job. What is the reason Boehner's leaving the job? What we have to assume here, the reason Boehner's leaving the job is he doesn't like being criticized. These guys forget. They committed things to us when they ran for office. They told us they were conservative. They told us they were going to stop Obama. They made a great point of this. They told us to rest easy. Mitch McConnell did it. Every one of them said that they know that that's what they were elected to do. They campaigned on some variation of the premise that they were serious. They were going to stop Obama, but they don't, and they haven't really seriously tried. And apparently they're not going to, and they don't. There isn't anybody who wants to take the job under the or with the realization that he's going to be at odds with the voters for the rest of the term. So how committed are these establishment types? I think what it points out, or what it illustrates, is that the inside the Washington Beltway establishment really doesn't care about voters and public opinion and all that, and doesn't even want to have to deal with it. And whoever's in this position is going to get the brunt of the criticism. And so it's in the old days, and it wasn't that long ago, folks, when a political party was the loser of a presidential election or other elections, that party would honestly assess where it had gone wrong with the voters and would attempt, to make it right with the voters. And by that I mean the party would attempt to, even if it was just for show, they would attempt to change or modify their beliefs in order to be relevant to the voters, because it was the voters who determined who won. And what's changed is, as far as these guys are concerned, it's the donors who determine who wins, and therefore it's the donors to whom they have to be loyal, not voters. And they don't even want to go through the motions here. So now there's not even any pretense of mollifying the voters. There's not even any attempt. I mean, this is, folks, as recently as these years running. This might have been the 2002 midterms. It was whatever year that I was invited to do election night coverage on NBC with Tim Russert and Brokaw. I think that was 2002. And it was, because what happened in that election year, that was the year of the Wellstone Memorial. Now, the rule of thumb is in off-year elections that the party in power loses big in Congress, particularly in House races, because there's always anger at the new president after 2 years. And the voters traditionally, want to put something in to stop what they don't like the new guy's doing or whatever. So that meant that the Democrats are going to have a huge 2002 midterm. But then the Wellstone Memorial came along, and they totally alienated the percentage of the American voting population that saw it. I mean, it wasn't over the top. It was supposed to be a memorial/funeral type thing, and it was one of the most viciously mean-spirited partisan events. A lot of Wellstone's Republican colleagues showed up. I mean, it was a memorial, and they were booed and harassed out of the place. And the Republicans ended up gaining seats. And I'll never forget Brokaw that night. I mean, they were just stunned over what was happening. The Democrats were supposed to just make tracks that night. It was supposed to be huge, and they were losing everywhere. And everybody came to me when it was all over and asked me what had happened, and I gave them my analysis, and I chalked it up as Wellstone Memorial. I said, these people just have totally misinterpreted where the people of this country are, so forth. But anyway, the next day, this is what's different. The next day, the Democrats went out, and this was the second time this had happened in like 5 years or 6. Pardon me. The Democrats went out, and they didn't mean it, but they started talking about how they were going to have to maybe shift some of their positions to get more in line with value voters, because there were, in the 2002 midterms, it was a bunch of people that showed up to vote on morality issues, according to exit polls, that had turned the tide. And the Democrats the next day, the next 2 weeks, didn't mean it, but they at least went out and said that they realized now they were out of touch with so many Americans, and they were shocked, and they were going to have to do something about it. That's gone now. That doesn't even happen. There's no pretense now of a party that loses admitting that it's maybe lost touch with the American people and needs to do things to get back in touch. This would be a great opportunity. One of, I don't know how many opportunities the Republicans, when the first opportunity Republicans had to coalesce a huge majority of voters in this country was Obamacare. Back in 2010, the 2010 gives birth to the Tea Party. The Tea Party springs to life spontaneously. I mean, literally effervescently from the dust. There is no leader. There is no official Tea Party per se. It's just a bunch of people. They start showing up at town hall meetings. They're outraged at two things, mainly, many more, but they're outraged at Obama's relentless, endless spending and what it meant for the future of their kids and their grandkids. And they were just outraged at Obamacare, the nationalization of the healthcare system. And if you looked at polling data back then, the Republicans could have aligned themselves with easily a 60% majority of Americans on just two issues. And they could have created for themselves a huge, loyal base. And they didn't do it. They did the opposite. What they did with the Democrats did. They ran away from it because the Tea Party is a bunch of kooks. And, this is for a lot of us. This is when the lights really went on. I mean, they'd been burning somewhat dimly. There had been some doubts about the modern-day Republican Party and whether it was conservative in some people's minds. But this erased all doubts when the Republican Party made no effort to form a giant governing majority coalition people based on issues. And there have been a number of other incidents like that since 2010. Immigration is one, where the Republican Party is just sitting on an opportunity to become a huge representative of a majority of thought in this country. And they have never once taken advantage of it. This is another one of those. There's no thought to anybody in the House who is representative of a majority of the thinking of the base of the party becoming speaker. Nope, it's all in the hat here, and they're running around. Who is the next establishment guy up? And the next establishment guy up, whoever it is, they can't find one that wants to do it because the establishment guy doesn't want to have to take the heat from the voters. The Republican Party is sitting here on a massive potential majority that could carry into the presidential election. But they don't want to do it because it would require them joining forces with whatever you want to call it, conservatives, call it Tea Party or whatever, but they just don't want to do it. So instead, they come up with candidates for speaker that we are supposed to think, well, better than Boehner, look at this guy's conservative. He's been conservative, voted conservative, this, that. They still continue to play the game of how can we fool them today. And people on our side have become too sophisticated to be fooled by the game of how can we fool them today. So to me, sitting here in my ravaged state, it just seems to me like another golden opportunity slithering out of their hands because they've never really even tried to grasp it.